Good morning, MacLaren. This morning, I would like to give you a little ancient history lesson. I would like to talk to you about the blackboard. Okay, not that ancient, but I joke in more ways than one here because even though it might seem like it to you, the 1990s are not exactly ancient history. But also because there are many chalkboards that are used in universities and colleges and research institutions all around the world, primarily in math and science departments. One photographer recently chose chalkboards and their often inscrutable markings on them as her subject. Inspired by this work, I have entitled my assembly, "Do Not Erase," an ode to the chalkboard. Chalkboards, or blackboards as they were often called because of the dark gray slate that was their original material, they were introduced to the United States in 1801, primarily at military academies, namely West Point. They were a recent invention by a Scottish educator named James Pillins. Go Highlanders! He needed a larger surface to use for his geography lessons, so he put together a number of individual student tablets to form a large board. These boards quickly caught on at schools around the country throughout the 1800s. All was not smooth sailing, however, and students at Yale University in the 1830s protested the adoption of this new technology as it required them to go to the board and complete problems without the use of their textbooks. They staged the Yale Blackboard Rebellions of the 1830s. There were two of them. In the end, however, teachers and administrators prevailed, and most of the students resigned themselves to completion of board work, and those that did not were expelled. The blackboards continued to grow in popularity in various forms until the 1990s, when the now ubiquitous whiteboards began to take hold of classrooms. But the chalkboard has remained a staple in many higher education institutions. Some have even been put back after some well-meaning administrator or builder replaced them with more modern whiteboards or glass. Historically, the iconic physicist photograph in front of a chalkboard on which is scrawled various equations and symbols and diagrams was made popular by Richard Feynman, seen here. And of course, Albert Einstein. In photographs of Einstein, we see a well-used board with erasures and corrections, while in more cartoon images of Einstein, we might see the final equation, E equals mc squared, as if plucked out of thin air. This image is the only known photograph of Einstein actually deriving and explaining his famous equation. Mathematicians have gotten in on the fun as well. Here is Andrew Wiles, who proved Fermat's famous theorem that I spoke about in one of my nerd sniping assemblies. Some amazing work at NASA has been done on their incredibly tall chalkboards. The movie Hidden Figures popularized the amazing work of Katherine Johnson, who helped calculate the trajectories for John Glenn's first trip to space, as well as helping with the Apollo missions that got us to the moon and back safely. Shown here is a standard lecture hall from the 20th century. They often had 9 boards total that could slide up and down, with 6 visible at any given time. So, beyond the purely practical or the iconography associated with famous physicists or mathematicians, why do so many math and science scholars prefer this seemingly outdated technology? Having read a bit on this and reflecting on my own experience with chalkboards, yes, when I started teaching, my classroom had just a chalkboard up front. I remember I used to hoard the brightly colored chalk for my geometry figures. So This morning, I have a few reflections as I show you a few more of Wynn's photographs. Besides the cringe of fingernails on a chalkboard, sometimes approximated by chalk in the middle of the lesson, grinding class to a halt, there is something wonderful and visceral about the feel and sound of chalk. It helps to slow the speaker down, even more so than a whiteboard, and forces the speaker to be intentional about what they are writing or drawing. The Japanese even have a word for this, bancho, the art of board organization, a skill that my students will tell you I do not have, but I continue to work on. Finally, there is something fascinating about the exchange of ideas that can happen on a shared board. And here, I think, is the key to why they have survived efforts to modernize or make spaces more efficient. On a shared chalkboard, ideas are externalized. They are not necessarily John's ideas or Sally's ideas, but just the idea. And at the same time, there is a tension between the weight and permanence that words take on when written clearly on a blackboard, and the inherent temporary and fragile nature of the medium. Hence the words, "do not erase." Through this lens of the chalkboard, maybe we can get a glimpse of the way that truly great minds think and work. Thank you.